Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Kamala Harris with the president of Poland overseas this morning, press availability. And Kamala was asked about the refugee crisis that has been brought on by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's numbering around 2 million, last reporting I saw.
And they said it's not a sustainable system. It's not going to last for more than a few weeks.
This is how that went.
I'd like to ask you about some reporting that my colleague here in Poland noticed. He recently spoke with the mayor of the largest border town, who told him that the refugee system is essentially not set up for this, that it will collapse. It's an improvised system that can work for maybe 2 weeks, but not indefinitely. And I'm wondering what the United States is going to do more specifically to set up a permanent infrastructure. And relatedly, is the United States willing to make a specific allocation for Ukrainian refugees? And for President Duda, I wanted to know if you think, and if you asked the United States to specifically accept more refugees.
Okay. A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Oh, my God.
Okay, so this time. Szanowna pani redaktor.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, President Duda, for stepping in where Kamala fears to go.
What kind of an answer is that? Why is she laughing? There is nothing funny about this. But she just gets nervous. Is like, are we going to be taking in Ukrainian refugees or are we not? And to what extent?
Yeah, well, remember, this is somebody who has demonstrated her understanding of the conflict thusly.
If you're watching any level of news, even social media, you're seeing everything that's going on right now in the Ukraine. Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't understand what's going on and how can this directly affect the people of the United States.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
I'm sorry you lost me with all that foreign policy jargon.
It's a big country next to a country called Russia in Europe.
We'll see if we can get deeper geopolitical thinking from our next guest. I don't think it's possible not to. Damir Marusic is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, co-founder of Wisdom of Crowds. Damir, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, Dan. Thanks. And hi, Amy. Thanks. Really nice to be here.
Good to have you. I won't force you to address Kamala Harris because that would be unfair. So address the news yesterday that the United States nixed this idea of Poland providing MiGs to the Ukrainians, despite the request of Zelensky that they do so.
Well, one can wonder whether providing the planes is a dangerous move, whether it escalates the war and brings the United States and NATO into it. The real criticism that I have of that decision by the White House is that it actually even came out into the news, that it was debated like that in the public, that the Poles basically demanded that we act and then forced us to say no. That should have been really handled behind closed doors. The decision.
Why?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why? Because it makes it look like the West is blinking, and
Correct.
And it makes Putin believe that he's right, that he has more resolve on the matter than the West does.
That is exactly right. It's I think the first major seam that has opened up in the alliance in this war, and that's not a really good look.
Yeah, precisely. So what is your, part of this too, you can't even get, accurate counts on sort of the casualties the Russian forces are taking, the civilian deaths. You hear reporting that goes from the hundreds to the tens of thousands. So it's really hard just as a layman and just trying to read as much as you can to understand how the war is going. Also, I'm a bit skeptical always of happy talk from governments about how well their side is doing. And so what is your assessment of where this is at and what the Ukrainians' ability to really repel Russian forces medium term is?
Well, let me put it like this. I think everyone has been surprised at the setbacks the Russians have encountered. You're absolutely right that a lot of that stuff has been somewhat circumstantial, and that the Pentagon itself has been pretty careful about its assessments, its basically the how sure it is about the assessments it has given at this point. And what we don't have, in fact, is figures for the kind of casualties that the Ukrainians are taking. It is a kind of David and Goliath fight, insofar as that the Russian military was supposed to be a lot more sophisticated and was more prepared, or at least it looked like they'd be more prepared for a fight to basically crush the Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians have put up a good fight. But I think that it's fair to say, looking at this, and even as someone who follows this stuff as their job, it's difficult. It's not just for a layperson to figure out exactly what's going on. I think it's probably fair to say that it's been an even fight so far. Probably losses have been 1-1. But overall, it's also quite possible the Russians haven't quite leaned into it yet. And a lot of the assessments are that we may see that in the coming days, that the real push happens now. So in the medium term, whether the Ukrainians could actually pull this through, again, what you're saying is right. It's hard to tell. I am pessimistic that they could actually pull it through.
Really? Why is that?
It's a nasty fight, and overall, the Russians have, I think, theater dominance overall. They can escalate. There's been talk that they could start unleashing chemical weapons, perhaps, in the coming weeks if it particularly got bad for them. And it could escalate even further to the use of tactical nuclear weapons that the Russians possess. These are nuclear weapons, also known as battlefield nukes, which take out a tank battalion or a base or something like that. They're not really meant to take out cities like strategic nuclear weapons that we all remember from the Cold War.
And there's already been reports of the use of vacuum bombs, which are particularly grotesque in terms of the impact on the victims.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I mean, it's not like he's unwilling to move in that direction and sort of instill fear by doing horrific things.
Absolutely. Look, here's the thing. I think that people forget when talking about war and the horrors of war is that war is horrible, and the point of a war ultimately is to win. And so wars generally escalate. The real nastiness of it is that at the very sort of top of the escalatory ladder, when you look at something like a world war, if everyone gets involved, is that it's a nuclear exchange sits there. But even below that, there are so many gradations of just escalating violence to force the enemy to compel that fall far short of a full nuclear exchange. That just basically in the Ukrainian theater, the Russians really do have the upper hand to be able to do that.
So then what happened yesterday at that maternity hospital and children's ward where 17 people were injured, 3 died, 1 was a 6-year-old. Was that during a ceasefire that was brokered?
Well, look, again,
do we not know in the fog of war?
it's the fog of war. I'd say, try to be, if you want to be sort of completely neutral about it, you could say targeting mistakes happen, et cetera. That said, the Russian way of war, even in Syria, saw this kind of civilian targeting, and that is, in fact, a strategy of sorts. It's to terrorize the civilian population. In Syria, Russians were bombing bakeries in towns, basically to help starve places like that. So it's not the first time the Russians would have resorted to something like that, and it is, in fact, it's a strategy for winning a war like the one they're engaged in right now.
So Victoria Nuland, who's Undersecretary at State for Political Affairs, and she's point on Ukraine, was before the Senate Intel Committee yesterday. And she got in an exchange with Rubio about biolabs in Ukraine, concern about biolabs in Ukraine that have pathogens that are being studied and so forth. and that they could be compromised and the Russians could obtain the contents of those labs. And it's a little unclear what's going on there, because on the one hand, this idea that there are American-financed bioweapons labs in Ukraine has been dismissed as Russian disinformation by John Kirby at the Pentagon, by the D.C. press corps. On the other hand, Victoria Nuland is expressing concern about these biolabs and also raising questions. If there's concern about biolabs that you had previous knowledge of, then why are materials the Russians could obtain that would present danger still in those labs, and so on and so forth. But even just sort of getting the baseline here, what does the U.S. have, or is the U.S. a part of, when it comes to biological research and the limits or lack of limits on that biological research in Ukraine?
That's a great question. And it's one that has been sort of floating around for a very long time. And you're absolutely right. The government has said, has denied it. And, now we're here and we hear, that really interesting and intriguing exchange with Victoria Nuland. The short answer is, we don't know exactly what's happening there. It could be a lot less nefarious than it sounds, though that did sound troubling. To try and give it the kind of benefit of the doubt of what that exchange might have meant, was that there are perhaps biolabs that, again, are just mainly research facilities, aren't bioweapons labs, but that were Russians to capture them. They could perhaps, even release their own bioweapons and then claim that, somehow this got out from a captured lab that the U.S. was financing. It's part of this kind of, back and forth that you have about, I don't like the term disinformation, but it is info war. It's kind of trying to get the upper hand on the other side and then blame them for nefarious actions. The Russians have been accusing the United States of having these research facilities in Ukraine, even before that in Georgia, the country in the Caucasus, where Russia fought a war in 2008. It's not really clear. Yeah.
And yesterday or the other day, the Chinese jumped on board with the Russians in asking for weapons inspectors to be sent to Ukraine to check out these labs. So there's two things that are concerning. One is the sort of murkiness around these labs, and two is, China falling in formation with Russia on this.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think I personally focus on China falling in with Russia on that. I mean, we've been demanding, some of us have been demanding inspections of Chinese labs as well. So, I mean, in that sense, you see that kind of, growing partnership as a result of this war. People point to the fact that China abstained from condemning Russia at the UN and thought that was a good thing, that they didn't vote against the condemnation. But, you can see it already that the Chinese are watching how this happens, watching carefully, and I think will be on the growing closer to Russia over time.
He is Damir Marusic, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, co-founder of Wisdom of Crowds. Damir, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Listen up. You got tax problems. You want the IRS off of your ASS. Whether you're an individual or a business and are having problems with the IRS, let PJN Tax Solutions Group help you solve your problems. We aren't one of those large, out-of-state 1-800 firms. We're a local tax resolution firm located here in St. Charles, Illinois. Our fees are fixed, so there's no ugly surprises at the end of the engagement. We will represent you in front of the IRS, allowing you to continue on with your life. You will not have to speak with an IRS agent. Would you go to court without an attorney? Then why would you represent yourself in front of the IRS? We offer a free consultation. Call PJN Tax Solutions Group today at 630-415-5296. Once again, 630-415-5296. Or better yet, visit our website at pjntaxsolutions.com. PJN Tax Solutions Group. Call us when you want the IRS off of your ASS.
All right. I don't know if any of you heard, but CTU President Jesse Sharkey, who's double vaccinated, boosted, always wears the N95 mask, has COVID. Maybe a dramatic reading later. We'll find out. Anyway, let's talk about what people do in the morning. What should you do as part of your routine? Well, take Balance of Nature. Why? It helps your immune system. That's why I take it. Doctors who have been on the show say eat a well-balanced diet, exercise, get enough sleep. And you have to admit, the sleep and the exercise, those are hard, but also the balanced diet. Not always easy. Even if you prepare dinner for your family, you're only having one vegetable, and that's not the recommended daily allowance of fruits and veggies. That's where Balance of Nature comes in. 6 capsules, you're getting 10 servings of 31 different fruits and veggies, all natural, no preservatives.